សូមគោរពហើយនឹងមុននឹងខ្ញុំចាប់ផ្ដើមខ្ញុំសូមអរគុណដល់លោកពូវ៉ាន់សដែលបានផ្ដល់ឱកាសនេះមកឲ្យខ្ញុំបានចូលរួមនៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីនេះនេះគឺជាកិត្តិយសមួយយ៉ាងខ្ពង់ខ្ពស់សម្រាប់ខ្ញុំចា៎ហើយទីបន្តនេះខ្ញុំសូមអភ័យទោសហើយនឹងសូមអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យខ្ញុំនឹងបាននិយាយជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសចា៎ពីព្រោះថាមានភ្ញៀវបរទេសខ្លះដែលគេចូលមករួមដែរហើយនឹងទី1thìនឹងពីខ្មែរយើងអាចស្ដាប់អង់គ្លេសបានតិចច្រើនក៏បាក់តិចក៏ដែរច្រើនក៏ដែរក៏យើងអាចស្ដាប់បានប៉ុន្តែពួកខាងគេគឺថាភាសាខ្មែរនេះពិបាកបន្តិចចាហើយនៅទី2ខ្ញុំក៏មានថាចង់មានបងប្អូនក្មេងៗខ្លះក្រោយទៅមកចូលរួមដែរហើយសម្រាប់ខ្ញុំគឺថាចង់យកឱកាសនេះឲ្យជួយទាញអារម្មណ៍ពួកក្មេងៗក្រោយទៅឲ្យចាប់ដឹងរឿងខ្មែរខ្ញុំខ្លះៗជាងថានេះសូមអភ័យទោសហើយខ្ញុំសូមអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យនិយាយជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសចាហើយទីបញ្ចប់គឺថាបើសិនជាមានពាក្យឆ្គងទៅនឹងគឺថាជាអចេតនាចាគឺសូមអភ័យទោសជាមុនMy respect to the forum. I would like to begin by extending my thanks to the organizers of this forum and especially to Mr. Van Saw for extending to me the honor of sharing my very humble reflections on the shifting political landscape of Asia and its implications for Cambodia. There is a Chinese saying, may you live in interesting times. And in many ways, we are both blessed and cursed to have lived in this very interesting time. In our lifetime, we have witnessed the world moved from a US hegemony to the Cold War bipolarity, and with the demise of the Soviet Union to a multipolar world where power comes in different forms, economic, political, military, and resides in different centers. And while it may be premature to proclaim the preponderance of Pax Sinara, it is incontestable that the prevailing power balance has shifted away from the historic centers in the West. While Rome, Madrid, Athens are in economic throes, Shanghai, Seoul, Mumbai, Singapore have become vital and vibrant sites. The US, the beacon of the capitalist world, and once a creditor nation, is now deeply indebted to communist China that was once its ideological nemesis. The prevailing threat for the US today is no longer global communism, but global terrorism. Vietnam, rather than a pariah state, is now a member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and an important labor market and investment destination for the West. For nation states, these shifts are promising for some and disconcerting for others. In times of transition, uncertain waters are often tested. The heating up of long-standing territorial disputes in the South China Sea involving China and some Southeast Asian nations are part of this flexing of political muscles. Be it on issues of trade, intellectual property, cybersecurity, or political strategic security involving hotspots such as the Korean Peninsula and the South China Sea, the overarching concerns for many Asia watchers, including many Asian countries, is what kind of power China will be and what that political preponderance may mean for the region. What we have seen in recent years is a Beijing that is even more actively seeking to build global alliances through aid and investment, especially with resource-rich countries, from Cambodia to Brazil. But one that is also not adverse to making forceful claims as on the issues of the Spratly Islands. For the United States, that has in many fundamental aspects virtually neglected the Asia-Pacific in its preoccupation with the Atlantic and the Middle East, the rise of China represents for many in Washington a political, strategic, and economic threat to US interests, but equally important to our allies in the region and to the viability of U.S. global leadership. As a consequence, much of Washington's maneuvers and posturings are intended as much to be strong signals directed at China as they are confidence-building measures for allies who will need reassurance that the U.S. is still committed to the security of Asia-Pacific. Washington's countervailing efforts have seen to the fortifying of relations with many close allies in Asia, such as Japan, South Korea, Thailand, and the Philippines, and the deepening of relations with potentially new allies, such as Vietnam. As the old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Such is the irony of international relations, that 30 years ago, it was China that was America's bulwark to what both regarded as an expansionist Vietnam. These shifts in regional and global landscapes are invariably engender ripples, if not direct impact, that are felt more disproportionately by smaller and lesser powerful nations. As the saying goes, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that dies. I would contend, however, that it's also true when the elephants dance together. But despite the power contention, China and the United States are also bound by economic ties and by their shared interests in containing conflicts that might jeopardize their larger interests. This means that issues such as human rights are often subordinated to more overarching regional and global preoccupations. And as it pertains to Southeast Asia, it is most likely that the U.S., despite Washington's professed interest in the region, will defer to ASEAN for regional conflict mediation. However, though ASEAN has embraced leadership roles in regional affairs, the association has long adhered to the principle of non-interference, which makes it unlikely to intervene in any meaningful way in matters that it regards as internal problems. For democracy advocates, this is a sobering reality, but one that must be recognized because of the tendency to assume that external actors are key to resolving problems. As a small country, Cambodia's geostrategic location has always been her strength and her vulnerability. We are strategically located with access to the sea and endowed with relative abundance of natural resources. But we are small and weak relatively compared to other nations, hence vulnerable. The country's long history, as you had heard this morning, is marked by constant struggle to maintain her sovereignty, tragically, rarely successful. In the 1700s to the 1800s, we sought protection from our eastern and western neighbors and ended up paying tributes to both. In the 1960s, we were caught in the East-West conflict that eventually consumed us, and in the post-1975 period, caught once again in the struggle for influence among two powerful communist neighbors and Thailand that in critical aspects persists today. This is the geopolitical reality that will always remain with us. We are today, as we were throughout our history, surrounded by much more powerful neighbors, all desiring control and influence. However, opportunities and constraints often inhabit the same plane. How constraints are managed and how opportunities maximized depend on agile and visionary leadership. Granted, these new diplomacies and power shifts have seen to the infusion of aid and investment, and Cambodia has benefited, no doubt, and can continue to benefit from this contest for influence. Just as relations with Vietnam have been useful in sustaining Beijing's interest, the China connection totaling $9.7 billion in investment over the last 18 years and close to $3 billion in development assistance has been effectively wielded by Phnom Penh as leverage against US pressure, particularly on the issues of human rights. Foreign aid, direct investment, and tourism constitute bountiful sources of revenue, making it possible for Cambodia to register impressive growth in recent years. Nevertheless, unless these gains and momentum are tied to the long-term vision of national development, Cambodia as a nation will not advance, for growth alone is not development in the full sense of the term. Worst, Cambodia may even regress as economic gaps widen rather than shrink in the face of new wealth, and social tension intensifies with growing landlessness and unreluctant destruction of forest land and water bodies that are the lifeline of our people, and overall immiseration of the country's poor. The Mekong is second only to the Amazon in terms of biodiversity. So projects like the planned 400 megawatt hydroelectric dam on the Sisong River, it not only threatens human settlements, but also migratory fish and in the larger ecology of the Mekong. Efforts at enhancing transparency and accountability and political liberalization, which alone would ensure enduring progress, has been glacially slow and measured. And despite existing laws that limit concession size to 10,000 hectares, over 47,000 hectares were granted to 2 companies, and that is only one of many instances. It has been estimated that concessions, de jure or de facto, of which 73% are of arable land, have adversely impacted some 700,000 Cambodians.